So before I jump into today's video, I'm just going to give you a quick introduction of my co-hosts, because it seems that invariably, anytime I'm working on a video, you're going to hear one of these guys. So I'll give you a quick introduction and an explanation of the noises that you will quite often hear. I think many of you know what I'm talking about already. So going left to right. First of all, down the front here, the little blondie, that is Amira. She's the one that you will hear snoring very loudly quite often in my videos. Behind her is the pup, Mouse. He's not so much of a snorer as yet, maybe when he gets bigger. Mostly from him, you will hear him playing with his toys. He's got a favourite fish that makes a lot of noise, and he's also quite amusingly got a mouse toy that makes a lot of noise. So you may hear him throwing them around the place. Occasionally, you may hear the craziness of two puppies playing, because his best friend is another little chihuahua who is a week older than him by the name of Jasper. I'm not going to share the photo because he's not my dog, but he is my sister's dog, and periodically I babysit him, and him and Mouse just go crazy playing together. So you will periodically hear puppy noises in the background, in which case you will know that Jasper is here and the boys are playing. Now on the right side of the screen is my old girl Taka. She's a Kelpie Labrador cross. You won't hear a great deal of her. You may hear her snoring occasionally, but her snoring is a far more mellow snoring than Amira's. So you may hear just a more quiet snoring. That's Taka. She loves her dog biscuits, so you may hear munching in the background at some point in time. That's Taka. You may also hear scrabbling sounds in the background. That's Taka walking along the floor. I've got wooden floors, and somehow Taka just doesn't know how to walk quietly. Now, the other one that you may occasionally hear, and this is kind of more of a bonus one, is a bird who occasionally turns up and makes alarm clock noises. So, no, I can't turn my alarm off when it goes off because it's not my alarm. Thanks to a tip from one of my subscribers, I had a bit of a look around and realised that it's actually a minor bird, which are noisy sods and very good at mimicking sounds. So with those introductions out of the way and the explanation of all the noises that you're going to hear, let's also get into the disclaimer that it seems I have to do in order to try and avoid being demonetized. I'm a true crime channel. My videos are for educational purposes and for adults only. I don't do clickbait. I don't do live streams. My videos are pre-recorded videos where I talk about current cases. In this video, I'm talking about the Madeline Soto case. For anyone who may have actually not heard of it, Madeline Soto was a 13-year-old girl who went missing only a few days after her birthday in 2024. It was later discovered that her mother's ex-boyfriend was responsible. And now he's locked up, facing 2 trials, one because of images found on his phone, and one for Maddie's death. Okay, so if you haven't clicked off out of boredom or frustration, welcome to my latest video. If you are new to my channel and you've not yet subscribed, please help me out by just clicking that subscribe button. You can click on the bell and choose what notifications you get. And of course, also please hit the like button as we jump into this video. Now, I did a video the other day where I read through responses from the state to motions put forward by the defence team. Now, I'll back up a little bit. If you are familiar with this case, you know that Stearns' defence filed 3 separate motions at the beginning of February where they essentially claimed that the phone was seized unlawfully, the search was unlawful, ergo the Google search warrant was also essentially illegal, fruit of the poison tree, all that sort of thing, which would basically have all the evidence from the phone and the Google Drive thrown out, which would, of course, completely destroy the CSAM case. Now, from the very beginning, I've said, look, don't get too worried about that. Their defence is just filing motion after motion. They're throwing whatever they can at the wall to see what'll stick. I also said I don't believe that these motions will stick because I think there is more than enough probable cause. A lot of people have been putting out videos saying the opposite and saying, right, the case is done, that's it, There's been a lot of criticism of Detective Tagler. A lot of people, it's become a sport almost to criticise Detective Tagler and claim that she's just destroyed the case single-handedly, which I personally don't believe for one moment. So, the other day, the state made 3 new filings. These were responses to the motions put forward by the defence to have evidence disallowed from the phone and the Google Drive. I did a video on this where I read through the 3 documents, which I'll link that below in the description section for this video. And then I have also uploaded those 3 documents to my Patreon. Now, if you're not familiar with my Patreon, it is free. All you have to do is go over, sign up, or they just ask you to sign up using your email. That gives you free membership, and then you have free access to all the documents that I upload on this case. I've so far uploaded quite a few. There's still a heck of a lot to go. There is also a tiered option. If you want to support my channel, then you can select like a $1 tier or a $2 tier, but that's certainly not something that I'm asking of you. I have basically set up my Patreon specifically to give people an easy place to find documents for free. Now, I did actually say the other day when I read through the documents from the state that this particular video that I'm working on now, I was going to shelve it. I had prepared everything for this prior to when the state released their response, and I felt that reading through the documents from the state was probably adequate and I didn't need to do this video. However, I've noticed that since then, at least 2 channels have put videos out where I don't know if they're intentionally trying to scaremonger or they just haven't interpreted these documents in the same way that I have. But it seems that there are still channels pushing the notion that the CSAM case is going to get thrown out because of the phone evidence. So I thought, well, I've read through the documents. I've given a kind of bare bones explanation of my interpretation of those documents. I truly do not believe that any judge is going to rule for the phone evidence or the Google evidence to be thrown out. Because to me, it seems quite clear that there was probable cause. But then, since other creators seem to take a different stance, I thought, okay, well, I want to review this by going through not just what we have in terms of the recorded interviews, but also what is written in Detective Tagler's report. Now, before I do that, though, I just want to give you a brief overview of what was established in the documents that were put out by the state the other day. So first of all, with regards to the phone evidence, they pointed out that consent to search his phone was given freely and voluntarily. And you hear that in the interview. Also, there is no sign whatsoever in any of those interviews, either of those interviews, that his will was overborne, which is the legal terminology, meaning that they basically coerced him, or that his capacity for self-determination was critically impaired. You could hear that he was quite capable of changing his story throughout the interview. He was reacting to when detectives told him, actually, that's a lie, we've got proof, by changing his story and coming up with a different version of the narrative. He was speaking quite clearly, even if it was the typical Stearns mumble. So it was pretty clear that there was no impairment there. Also, he entered his passcode into his phone for the detectives. That is a clear demonstration of willingness to allow them to look at his phone. He made no attempt throughout the interview to withdraw consent. And these are all things that are in the document outlined as basically making it legally binding, essentially. Now, they also have said that they had probable cause, meaning that the facts that were known to all of the law enforcement officers that were investigating the case at that time led to reasonable belief that a crime had been committed by Stearns. And these are the reasons they gave for that. First of all, he consistently identified himself as the last person to have seen Maddie, as did Jen. There was, secondly, tag reader evidence, proved that basically he was lying about where he was on that Monday. So the tag reader evidence showed that he was not in the locations that he claimed to be at the times that he claimed to be there, etc. Also, number 3, Maddie never arrived at school, meaning that he was meant to have driven her to school, she never arrived. Puts the focus back on him. Also, he did 2 factory resets on his phone. This was known to them at the time. Additionally, there is the fact of Maddie being alone with him in a bedroom the night before she disappeared. They also pointed out he regularly used his phone to speak to Maddie prior to this, meaning that there could also be evidence in those conversations. They cited the fact that he changed his story frequently when he was confronted with his inconsistencies. They also mentioned that he had his phone with him during various portions of the day on the 26th, going back to the point that he was the last person known to have been with Maddie. He was inconsistent with his statements of what he did on the 26th, so it's all important. They also pointed out that his phone was actually attached to a Google account, even though he denied being logged in. They also pointed out that there were exigent circumstances, basically meaning that there were things that if they did not take the phone at that point in time, could have meant a loss of evidence. So fear of imminent destruction of evidence. And for that, they cited his multiple lies throughout his interviews and that he had already attempted to destroy evidence through 2 factory resets. Personally, for me, the exigent circumstances should be more than enough justification for seizing and searching his phone. He had factory reset it twice. There was definitely a risk of evidence being destroyed. And they already had enough probable cause to believe that he was responsible for Maddie being missing. Now, moving on to the Google Drive or the Google account, because there's the claim that, well, that's the fruit of the poison tree. None of that should be allowed because they seized the phone illegally. Now, the big thing here is, first of all, law enforcement obtained that search warrant prior to searching the Google account, which means that legally the challenge here isn't actually against Orange County, but the challenge is actually the warrant, which means they are challenging the judge who issued the warrant, which was Judge Whitehead. Now, he issued the warrant basically having concluded that there was adequate probable cause. And it is clearly set out that in terms of if you are challenging a warrant, then essentially if another judge is going to try and overturn a warrant that's been approved by another judge, they better have a damn good reason for it, essentially. The wording is essentially they need to be extremely cautious when reviewing another court's decision. You can imagine the mayhem if judges were just like, oh, I don't like that guy, so yeah, okay, I'm going to overturn that warrant for you. There's definitely a higher level of discrimination, and I don't mean discrimination in a negative way, but they need to be totally sure, without a doubt, that there is a problem with the warrant. And under the law, it basically says that they should only disturb an issuing magistrate's determination if that issuing magistrate abused his discretion in relying on information in the affidavit supporting the probable cause. In other words, so if that judge basically looked at the information in there and it can be proven that there wasn't probable cause established in that warrant, in the affidavit, for the warrant, and the judge still gave the warrant, then yes, then you can say, okay, that warrant is illegal. Like I said, it's not likely to happen because it's frowned upon unless there are legitimate circumstances. Basically, what the state then goes on to say is that there was substantial basis given in the affidavit to allow the judge to conclude that there was probable cause. One of those things, one of the probably more significant things, being that Detective Heller, who created the affidavit, specifically identified Maddie as being depicted on several files of CSAM material that were on Stefan's phone. The affidavit also provided sufficient evidence. Now, yes, apparently the defence has tried to argue, well, that doesn't count because they seized the phone illegally. So the fact that he's saying that the evidence is these images on the phone is wrong. That goes back to the point of it's up to the judge. This judge made the determination that what was given in the affidavit was sufficient to issue a warrant for the Google Drive. Meaning he could have turned around and said that the phone was seized illegally and therefore refused to issue the warrant. But once he issued the warrant, that's him basically saying, according to law, everything you have given me in your affidavit justifies making this warrant. So, like I said before I went through all that, challenging the Google Drive evidence is not challenging the detectives, it is challenging the judge who issued the warrant. And it is not likely that one judge is going to overturn the ruling of another judge unless there is a really clear reason to do so. Judge Carsten, who is dealing with this case, as I mentioned in a previous video when I spoke about his background, has an intimate knowledge of case law, precedents, etc. One of the things he has done in the past is work as a lecturer, specifically in that area. So he is going to be very, very unlikely to rule against this other judge because he's basically challenging the knowledge and experience of this other judge. And that said, I mean, let's be real. If he were to throw out the phone evidence and the Google evidence, then can you imagine the backlash on him? It would be a career ender for him, unless he had really good justification. And what has been cited by the defence team is not really good justification. Now, going back to talking about the warrant, there is what is called a good faith exception. This basically means that the court determined that a warrant was justified for the search of the Google Drive. So detectives acted in good faith based on the warrant, which means that their actions in searching the Google Drive were legal. The only way they could actually get all this thrown out would be if they could prove that in writing the affidavit, the detectives lied or made up fake evidence, which we know was not the case. So at the very least, the Google warrant, the Google images, the images from the Google Drive, are highly unlikely to be excluded as evidence. But at the same time, I think the state has well and truly established that there was more than enough probable cause in terms of the phone. Basically, they have said in their documents that a lot of what the defence has claimed isn't based in law. They have misinterpreted precedents, or there isn't sufficient precedent. So, with that said, I am going to go through Detective Tagler's report and combine that with the clips that we have, the audio clips from her interview with Stearns, just so we can just go back over that and see what was actually going on at that point in time. Okay, so first of all, just a quick apology. As you will hear, I've had to turn the aircon back on, even though it's the middle of April. At the moment, we're having another burst of summer here in Bendigo. So this house gets really hot towards the end of the day, and it reached a point where I had to turn the aircon back on. Now, I will upload this report to Patreon for you. It is 8 pages long, so if you do go on there and you pull up the report, it actually starts with, I think, page 4 of 11. But the pages before that are just nothing. They're just kind of random, all the administrative stuff. So the report itself is 8 pages long. Now, because it is teeny tiny writing, and I thought you guys would probably find it easier to read if I copied and pasted it into pages so that I could make the text bigger. Basically, what you've got here is excerpts from that document. If you have the 896-page document, then this begins on page 30. So if you did want to just go look for it there, that's where you will find it. So, like I said, this is just excerpts because there is a lot of detail. Detective Tagler does a really good job of putting in solid details in her reports. So it's definitely worth a read. I think she covers things pretty well. So this starts partway down page 30. I asked Stefan if he had gone anywhere else since they had time to kill, to which he stated no. I asked Stefan if there was any reason why he would be back on John Young Parkway, and he stated when they tried going to the McDonald's the second time, he would have made a left instead and looped around. Like, boo, boo, boo. I asked Stefan to show me on the map what he was referring to. Now, this paragraph details everything that Stefan said. We don't need to go into that. We've heard it a million times. So we will go down towards the bottom of this paragraph, so the fourth line from the bottom. I asked Stefan if he recalled what time he dropped her off, and he advised me he estimated it was around 8:20 and 8:40 hours. I asked Stefan if he had the Google Maps application on his phone, and he advised me he did, but he was not mapping it at the time. At this time, I asked Stefan if he would mind if I looked at his map, to which he stated he did not. Unlocked his phone and handed it to me.
Are you on your phone? Do you have Google Maps?
I do, but I wasn't mapsing it.
When you're giving her rides, does she sit in the front or the back?
She sits in the front. She likes to sit.
Do you mind if I look at your maps real quick?
Yeah, that's fine.
I would just comment that I'm so grateful that Detective Tagler said he was not mapping it at the time, as opposed to his dumbass made up word of mapsing it. Now, we have more detail in the report of Stefan describing the route and watching Maddie walk towards school and all that sort of stuff. And then she says, I asked Stefan if he would mind if I checked he was logged on to his Google account, and he replied he was not logged on, but that it was okay for me to check. While I looked through Stefan's Google history, Detective Acosta continued to speak with Stefan. I will just point out that I copied and pasted this off a PDF, which is why you get the number 1 in a few spots instead of I, because it sometimes doesn't necessarily recognise the text.
Do you mind if I just take a picture of your history?
Yeah, that's fine.
Is it okay if I go in your settings real quick? I just want to see if you're logged on to your Google.
I am not logged on to my Google with that, actually.
Is it okay if I check?
Yeah.
So obviously you can tell here, as they mentioned in the documents, he claimed he wasn't logged on to Google, but she's in his Google Maps and she's looking at various Google things. So I confirmed with Stefan he used Google Maps for directions, to which he stated yes, go places, search addresses, look at store hours, write reviews. It's a pretty new phone though. As I looked through Stefan's Google Maps account, I noticed he did not have recorded travel on the account consistent with the driving he informed us he'd done on February 26, 2024 and February 27, 2024. I asked Stefan when he had returned to the area to assist, and he stated it was on February 25th, 2024 at approximately 8:30, just in time to make sure she was doing all her nightly routines as they waited for Jen to get home. So Detective Tagler then goes on with more details of what was going on with the interview, which we've all heard. I've only just recently gone over that, so I'm not going to read through all this. We'll skip on to the next part. So this is just one example of the way Stefan was changing his story when they confronted him. So they're talking about looking at the map and the directions. Detective Acosta pointed out to Stefan the direction he continued to mention he'd travelled was northbound on John Young Parkway. Detective Acosta then asked Stephen why his vehicle was seen travelling southbound in the direction of Kissimmee. Stefan stated he was sorry and that he'd forgotten his gate clicker and had driven back to his residence. Stefan advised he went through the front gate and had used his parking pass to grab his clicker, and that he provided the wrong times because he was not a morning person. So again, this is demonstrating the lies, this is demonstrating him changing the story as he gets questioned over his lies. So after explaining the whole gate clicker thing, then going down to the almost bottom paragraph here, Detective Tagler says, at this point I noticed Stefan's phone only contained minimal data on his call history and appeared as if some of the messaging applications had never been used. I stepped away for a second as Detective Acosta continued to speak with Stefan. I returned to speak with Stefan and asked him if he would unlock his phone again, which he did. I asked Stefan if he had stated he did not have the phone the morning he dropped her off. He replied he'd forgotten it because he was too busy trying to get her out the door. Then she's establishing when he had the phone and when he didn't have the phone, which fits in with what the state was saying. There were times when he did have his phone with them, and that's important in terms of the case. I informed Stefan when I was looking at his call history I had noticed he only had a call log for February 27 and asked if that was usual on his phone. Stefan stated, "No, it's a new phone, and stupid, I went to do an update yesterday morning and I don't know what the what the heck I did, but somehow during the massive iOS update I managed to factory reset my phone and lose all my contacts and information." I asked Stefan if he recalled what time that occurred, which he stated sometime while he was hanging out with Jen. I informed Stefan I was going to maintain possession of his phone at this time and asked him to please refrain from going back inside his vehicle. Stefan swore everything he told us was true.
In the meantime, while we're waiting for all this to get sorted out, I am going to hold on to your phone, okay? I'll give it back to you when we're done.
Okay.
Okay? Do you have any questions for us?
How long are you gonna need my phone?
I'm not sure. I'm waiting for my supervisor to call me.
My dad. It's just my dad's using that to get a hold of me and get updates.
They can call Jen's phone.
Okay.
Did the other detective give you his business card?
Now, this is important because this occurred between the two interviews. So, at this time, Detective Acosta and I responded to the front entrance of the complex and made contact with security in reference to video surveillance. Detective Acosta and I reviewed the surveillance showing both the front and the rear entrance of the complex, which exited onto Dyer Boulevard. In the surveillance footage, I observed a male wearing a red shirt leaving the complex in a 2010 silver Lincoln MKZ through the rear gate at 7:50 hours, and a female wearing a green sweater in the front seat. This person appeared to be sitting upright with her head slumped over to her left side. At 8:19 hours, I observed a male wearing a red shirt enter the complex through the front gate near North Hoagland Boulevard in the silver Lincoln with someone in the front passenger seat wearing a green sweater and once again slumped over. At 08:31 hours, the male wearing a red shirt left the complex in the silver Lincoln MKZ through the rear gate with the female in the front passenger completely slumped over to the left. So they reviewed the footage before the second interview. So with all that in mind, this is what we get at the beginning of the second interview. On February 28, 2024, Detective Acosta and I conducted a second digitally recorded sworn interview with Stefan Stearns. Below is a synopsis of his statement. I asked if I had his consent to download his phone or if I needed a search warrant to collect the contents. Stefan said it was fine and provided me with his phone PIN. I advised Stefan that while digital forensics was looking through Maddie's phone, they noticed there was a lot of communication between her and him. And then she goes on to ask him about the relationship between Maddie and Stefan, etc.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Your phone. I told you that I was gonna hold on to it and that we would like to download your phone, right?
Okay.
Is this something that I have your consent to do, or do I need to get a search warrant for your phone?
It should be fine.
You're okay with us going through your phone?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I have the PIN to your phone?
42586.
So for me, when you go through the documents from the state and then you have a look at Detective Tagler's report alongside the audio from the interview, the report explains some of what's going on while she's looking at the phone, and you can see that there was definitely probable cause. At the point in time when she said, "We're going to retain your phone," at that point he had admitted to factory resetting his phone. She'd also seen that he'd lied about being logged onto his Google account, because obviously when she went on she could see what was going on there with all his Google stuff. And in amongst his Google stuff, she could see that messages and stuff were missing from before that period of time, which is how she discovered he'd reset the phone. So it's my honest opinion that those creators who are still maintaining that Detective Tagler did the wrong thing and that this whole case is probably going to be thrown out, I believe there's one of two things happening here. Now, the creators I've seen that are saying this are creators who pop in and out of Maddie's case, in that when there's a new document or video released, then they'll do a video, but they don't really deep dive. And I can't help wondering if perhaps they just need to spend a little bit more time reviewing the interviews, the documents, etc., and then they might be able to see that in actual fact there is more than enough probable cause for them to have seized the phone and for them to have downloaded the phone. By the time they actually did the download of the phone, you have, based on Detective Tagler's report, at that point in time, they had all this footage, including the footage of Stefan going in and out through the gate with Maddie slumped over on the passenger side of the car. So when you have all that background information, you can see Detective Tagler didn't do anything wrong here. And I know there's some people that are still going to argue it because it depends on who you listen to, and some people I think are very convincing with their arguments that Detective Tagler is some evil, horrible detective who totally did the wrong thing. But I think when you start to look at it logically and you look at the sequence of the investigation, then to me it would actually seem worse had Detective Tagler not seized his phone at that point in time. Especially because you have exigent circumstances. She knew when she seized his phone that he had already attempted a factory reset on his phone. He had already attempted to destroy evidence. That alone is enough. So I'm going to leave it at that. I hope this provides a bit more clarity for people. I know when you get creators who have a lot of subscribers who speak with authority and say, I know this is certain, that it is easy to believe that what they are telling you is accurate. But I think sometimes it comes down to a little bit of logic, a little bit of common sense, and a little bit of research. You need to pull everything together and look at everything as a whole. Not just say, well, they said these things in this submission, in this motion, and the motion convinces me that this is the case. Because, of course, when someone writes a motion, when the defence is writing a motion, it is a persuasive document. They're trying to persuade the judge to see things their way. We've seen now from the documents that the state has put out that what is happening with defence is that they are either knowingly misusing statute and basically quoting precedents that don't really apply, or they're just poorly educated and don't understand these precedents adequately. But the problem is people read these documents and go, oh, look, this is what they're saying. They're saying Detective Tagler did it all wrong. Let's stick with that. and they don't stop and think about the big picture and think about who's telling the story here. Because at the end of the day, I mean, even with the state, obviously to me, their documents are far more precise, they are far more explanatory. Seems to me that they have a really good handle on statute law, on precedent, etc. And we know that the judge does as well. But even still, we have to remember that the state has their bias as well. They want to prosecute this guy. So the goal of their document is to make sure that this evidence can't be thrown out. Hope I'm not adding to confusion here. But bottom line, it really does not appear to me, when you look at it all together, that Detective Tagler did do the wrong thing. And I would imagine that were we able to interview her and say, if you were in this position again, would you do it the same way? And I can guarantee you she would say, yes, I would do it the same way, because if I gave him back his phone and he destroyed that phone or deleted all the more evidence, the case is gone. So at the end of the day, Detective Tagler should actually be praised for her actions, not put down for her actions. Without her seizure of that phone, then there could have been a lot of evidence destroyed. What was the first thing he did after he got out of that first interview with her, after she seized his phone? He got onto Jen's phone, trying to access his Google accounts. Why? You can bet he was going to try and destroy evidence. Unfortunately, he didn't have the two-step authentication going there. What did he do after the second interview? When he was actually free to move and not have to wait at the townhouse, he drove down to Northport. He pulled the hard drive out of his computer after attempting once again to access his Google account and destroyed or hid that hard drive. That's not being recovered. So it was definitely the right call by Detective Tagler, because otherwise, given more time with his phone, then quite likely he could have destroyed a heck of a lot of evidence, and then that CSAM case wouldn't exist. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you for listening. I hope I haven't created more confusion for you. I hope that for those people who are perhaps, or were perhaps feeling concerned by content put out by other creators, perhaps this allows you to feel a little bit less concerned. I would put money on the fact that these motions are going to be thrown out. They are not solid motions. I believe Detective Tagler did the right thing. And I have no doubt that the judge is going to throw those motions out. So on that note, thanks for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button and leave a comment. With that said, thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Keep